recording. Okay, so for the CS students, let me close this one. Okay. We have the crude, no, crude, and then we have the local host, student information. Okay, so this was our, for the CS students, this was our previous example of our web application project. And then this one, so we have the PHP login session. Oh, I've already discussed to you how to how the session works, PHP session works. Let's try. Okay. Sino yung comments?
Sir, pwede lang mag-leave yung mga IT, sir.
Yes, for the IT students, you may now leave. You may now
Yes, sir.
Sir, yung attendance is
Mhm. Okay, attendance daw. Wala. Okay, IT. Sino? Sino?
Villanueva, sir.
Villanueva.
Sir, Kamenso, sir.
Wait lang. Villanueva. Kamense.
Padua, sir.
Parang Kamense. Kamense. Tapos, Padua. Sino pa? Wala na? Okay. So, for the CS students, so this was um, our example. But, mm, okay, so previously we have the create module, we have read module, we have the update module, and then we have the delete module. But then again, for the programming practices kasi, this is not the quite advisable for creating a system. Why? Because for the update, you need to put the ID number. What if the user forgot the ID number of that specific person? So, how can you how can you how can you know the ID number of that person if in case that person forgot? Okay, so this is much more user friendly for the user. We have the chat, I'll be discussing that later on. We have the create module, same, and then we have the subject management. I'll be discussing that later on. The subject management, we have the read, and then we have the search method. Then we have the two search methods, and then we have also okay. Yan. So we have two methods also for the edit. We have edit method 1 and then edit method 2. I'll be discussing that. What is the difference between two methods? So let's start. So let's open our file muna. Let's go now to our sump stdocs crude. Crude. So this is our crude. We have database connection. So let's check our database connection. So close other tabs. Close other tabs. For the database connection, I have here the ppmc hrs db. So there we have. You can modify. You can change the database name if you want. So let me. Okay. So let me delete na lang muna. Database. Let's start with this and then we have drop. Okay, good. So first we have to create this database. So databases, paste, create there. So our database. Next in our file we have the databases. First is we have the information. Let's copy and then let's create a table. So In your database, click your database and then click the SQL, paste the command and then go. So it will create the information table. Next is we need to create the account table. So copy and then go to your database, go to your SQL and then paste the command, and then we have two tables. We have the account and information. Okay, so let's start. For the create, this is one of my mistake. Okay. I want to show you what is my mistake for the ID, for the information. And by the way, when we let's go now to our create form. So this is our create form, and so we have create.php. So this is our create.php. So when we click the submit button, it will go to create process. So let's open our create process. So insert into information, tama. That is our table name. Good. I have this table. Information. Good. Next. Let's take a look at the structure of our table. For the ID that is not auto increment, if you notice my table doesn't have any unique primary key. Wala siyang primary key, which is one of the wrong practices of a database management. Once you create a table, okay, so all the tables should have what? All the tables should have a unique, and it should have a primary key. So if you notice in my table, structure of my table, I don't have any primary key. So I'll be discussing that later on, what will be the disadvantage of having no primary key in your table. So let's try to create. By the way, I have here the subject. For the subject, this is a drop down. I want you to show on how you will create a management in your system. So I have here the subject management. Okay, so for example, math, then submit. Okay. By the way, we have to look at our code subject PHP. So in our subject.php, so once we click the submit button, it will go to our subject process.php. So let's open the subject process.php. By the way, we have to create this table, subject details. So in our database, here we don't have any subject details table, so we have to create. Okay. Create a table, subject details. Only 2 columns will do. Okay. So first is we have the ID. So take note, your table should have at least one unique primary key. So we have the ID, and then next, based from our table, we have to put subject. So this is our column name, and then text for the data type. Save. So let's try it again. We put math, then submit. Then let's take a look at our database. Kapag nag-save, let's browse. There, we have math. Okay, so let's in our create module, we have math. Another, we put English, another data. Submit. Then take a look at our database again. We have math and English, and then here create, we have math and English. Last, computer. Submit. And then here we have math, English, and computer, and in our database we have 3 subjects already. We have math, English, and computer. I'll be discussing that later on. What will be the content of this one? The ID 1, for example, and then name Joffer. Ayan, so 28, kakapanganak ko lang. Submit. Okay, so we have yan, the record. Next, let's open our create.php. Okay, so in our create.php, so basically we have the text box for the ID, text box for the name. Okay, the name is data1. And then we have the subject text box for the, I mean, this is our select and option. So I think during your platform-based development one, if you have a platform-based development one, your HTML subject, your teacher discussed to you the select and option, which is the drop down. And this is the drop down. We have the select. Okay, the ID is cell1, the name is subject, and then we have the option. So this is the options. Now here in my option, uh, I link that to my database. So I have my query select all from the subject details. So in my database, in our database, we have this one. Okay, so select all from the subject details, and then we have database connection. This is our database connection con. Then next is we have the query. This is our query. So if we have a condition here, the number of rows will count the number of rows in your database. So if it is greater than, meaning it is not empty, meron siyang laman, and then it will do the looping statement. So this is my looping statement. Why I use the looping statement? I'm using the looping statement and then fetch ASOC so that it will check our database from our first record until the last record. Yung first record, math 2, English 3, computer. So that's why I'm using the looping statement. And then for the fetch ASOC is used for retrieving the data one by one. So from the first record until the last record, fetch ASOC. And then we have here the variable row that will hold the data. So we have option there. This is the option value echo subject. So this is the what? This is the name of our column name. Yan, subject. Okay, column name, and then we have the name subject, and then we have here to display the content of our database. There we have math, English, and computer. When we change this one, if you want the ID, then it's okay. And refresh. Oh, yeah. 1, 2, 3. But what we need is the subject. So math, English, and computer. Good. So once we click the submit button, it will go to our create process. So let's open our create process. So same, when insert into information, we have the ID, data1, data2, subject. But then again, we have a problem with that again because, so let's read. Ay, nagsasave naman siya. Information, data1, data ID, data1, data2, pero we don't have this subject. Okay, so let's try it again. Create 1 Maria math date submit. Yun, hindi siya pumasok, walang pumasok Maria. So when we check our database, still nothing happened to our database because in our code we have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, but in our database we have only 1, 2, 3. We have the ID, data1, data2, data2, but we don't have the subject column, so we have to create. So add one column after subject, text, data type, save. So we have 4 columns: ID, data1, data2, and then we have the subject. ID, data1, data2, and then we have the subject. Then let's try to create another record. 1 Maria date There you go. Yan. Meron na tayong Maria. And then we have Joker. Okay. But then again, Joker and Maria has same ID number 1. One of the disadvantage of this one, kasi nga in our column, the structure of our table, we don't have any primary key. Wala siyang primary key and we don't have any unique data in our record. So that's why our system accepts the same ID number. But one of the disadvantage of that, for example, if I want to edit, okay, so I want to edit this one, Jofer record ID number 1. If I want to edit that one and then make change, for example, Mark, then update, what will happen? ID number 1 Mark and ID and even Maria changes the data. So that is one of the disadvantages. Another disadvantage, if we want to delete again Mark, delete, then it will delete 2 records. So that is one of the disadvantage of having no primary key or unique data in our database. Next, so let me discuss to you 2 methods. By the way, for the search muna tayo. For the search method 1, so let's open search method 1. So this is our search method 1. We have the ID and then we have the drop down. We have the form action, so when we click the submit button, it will go to the search process. We have the input type text ID, so this is our ID, and then we have the select an option. This is our select an option, the alphabet A, B, C, D, E until Z. So when we click the submit button, it will open the search process 1, search process method 1. So this is our search process method 1. So take note, we have only 2 objects in here. We have the text box and we have the drop down. So this is our drop down. Meron siyang label here. Okay, anyway, so text, ID, name. So in our search process, we have the ID and then we have data 1. So this is our data 1 for the select. So we have the select, and then the value, these are the value of our drop down, this one. Okay, and then we have here select all from the information where the ID is equal to where ID like asterisk search asterisk and data 1 like variable then asterisk. We have here siguro in your for the CS students, you have the information management, the subject, Infoman. CS students, still there?
No, sir.
So you don't have any background about database? Yung ganito? Do you have
Sir, meron po.
Meron? Okay, so you have a database. So I think your teacher taught you what is the usage of this one, yung percentage. Still remember? Okay, anyway, so select all from the information where the ID like the search. What is the search? That is the ID. Okay, so for example, here, so based from our record, we have ID number 2 and Jose. So ID number 2 and J. Ayan, 2 and Jose. 2 and then the first letter of the name is J, then submit. So it will retrieve this one. Okay? Because of this, we have 2 conditions in here. Our ID is like the ID we input, and then the data 1 or the name is likely the same with the name. So this is our name and our ID for the search. We have 2 conditions. And then here same, we have the connection, we have the query, we have um, retrieving the data. So this is our how we will retrieve the data. And then by the way, we have the edit and post. So what is important here for the so let me discuss this one, 2 and J. We have edit and delete. So we have two methods, right? Oh, by the way, this one I'm using the looping statement again for what? The looping statement for retrieving the data, all the data, for example here, all the data from our database. Kaya ako gumamit ng looping statement. Now, J, submit. And then we have the ID. So this is the ID, the data 1, and then we have the data 2. If you want to put the data 3, it's okay. Ayan, parang no, this is the subject, right? Yun sa database natin, we have the subject table. Ay, wait, nasa search process method 1. Search process. And J. At wala yung subject. Search process method 1. Search process method 1. We have here this one. Pero wala siyang subject. Where is our subject? Ah, okay. Kasi wala pala siyang subject. Okay. Anyway, when we let's try to create another data. Lead, that is ID number 1, J. ID number 1, J. Submit. Yun. We have the subject. But, let me remove. Wala na. Okay. And then here, we have another table data for the edit. So, this is our edit. We have two methods. We have this one, and then we have the method 2. The method 2 is using the post. So I've already discussed to you what is the post. And then and then the other one is the other method is using the get method. This one is post method. Now for the get method, this one, so when we click the edit method 1, so it will go to our edit method 1. By the way, the difference is when we click the edit method 2, which is the post method, ito post method, take a look at your address. Our address doesn't display records or data of our record. But when we use the get method, pinapakita nyo yung one of the data, which is the ID. So that's why it's more safer to use this method, the post method, rather than the get method, kasi it displays one of the data of your record. Anyway, yan. So when we click the edit method 1, it will open the edit method 1.php. So let's open our edit method 1.php. So this is our edit method 1.php using the get method. Okay, row ID, get ID, meaning where's the get ID? The get ID is here. Yun. This is our get ID at your address bar. Okay, and then put that in our variable ASS. So select all from the information where the ID is equal to the ID that we get, and then retrieve, and then there, and then we have the update form. So this is our update form, echo, and then when we click the update button or the submit update button, it will go to the update.php. So this is our update.php. Okay. Yun lang, update information set, etc. So same with. And then we have here the Windows location or yung redirect. Anyway, yun. So for the meantime yun muna, that's all. That is my topic for this week. Okay, so I have here the create, we have the subject management. Okay, so you can apply that to your project. So if in case that you need a subject management, okay, in case or management in your system, and then in our read we have this one, this method, because this is much more better than this one. Kasi nga if you forgot the ID number, okay, if you forgot the ID number, then you cannot update or delete some of your record. But if you will be using this one, no need to input your ID kasi it's already in there. Okay, yun. And then for the search method one, okay, so I've already discussed this one. So in your project, I want you to put the search method in your project. I have here also the search method 2. I'll be discussing that later on. Search method 2 is a live search. Live search. Example of a live search. So when you go to Google and when you type something, so it will give you some suggestion. So this is as an example of a live search. So I'll be discussing that later on. By the way, class, do you have any question?